Freeman, Brian Wilson, Mary Catherine Ham, today's newsmakers, and you, the Morning Majority.
105.9 FM, WMAL.
8:37 on WMAL, the Morning Majority. Jodi Kantor is on the phone, author of the new book, The Obamas, which has a lot of people in this town talking today. Jodi, good morning. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Before we get into the book, I do want you to tell us exactly how you did the research for it. Who did you, I know there's some people that you're not going to tell us the names of, but how many people did you talk to? What was your research? How many hours did you spend talking to these people in order to write this book?
I'm happy to. So I've been covering the Obamas for almost 5 years for the New York Times. I've interviewed both of them repeatedly. For the book itself, I talked to about 200 people, including 33 current and former White House aides. I spoke extensively with Valerie Jarrett, Susan Scher, David Axelrod, Robert Gibbs, Eric Whittaker, Marty Nesbitt. This is the sort of Obama inner circle, the closest group of people around the President and First Lady. And I also want to add that the book was fact-checked with all these people and others beforehand, and that the White House has not really substantively challenged any of the reporting in the book, and even some of the small things they've taken issue with haven't really panned out.
Do you? A lot of controversy surrounds, a lot of talk surrounds Michelle Obama. Do you think Michelle Obama is happy living in the White House, happy being the First Lady of the United States?
Well, I don't want to read her mind, but this is what I can tell you, which is that things have changed tremendously. And this was part of what was so fascinating about the reporting, because Michelle Obama gets to the White House, and she is a stranger in a strange land. The Obamas are true outsiders, right? And in the presidency, your strength and your weakness is often the same. And in the 2008 campaign, the fact that the Obamas were outsiders was very appealing to a lot of voters. And then they get to the White House, and that freshness becomes a little bit more of a liability. Unlike the Bushes, who really knew the presidency, really knew the White House, knew the deal, the Obamas are very, very new to it. And also, I think especially since we're talking to Washingtonians here today, this is a very savvy group of listeners. We know not to buy all of the glamorous images of White House life we see, right? We see these state dinners, we see Air Force One. People in Washington know that this life is actually very, very hard in some weird ways, that there are tremendous perks, but then there are also some sacrifices that are almost bizarre. So her challenge as First Lady, right, is that she's got to figure out how to make this work for her. This job that's sort of not really a job, all of the obligations, the fact that she's the first African-American First Lady, what's her relationship to her husband's staff. And my reporting was really about the process of watching her work out these issues, sometimes in very painful ways. But by the end of my reporting, she had really come out ahead. She had turned it around. And I'll tell you, a great surprise of this book is that, by the end of my reporting, I actually thought she was in some ways in better shape than the president was. He entered the White House on top of the world and has kind of been descending to earth ever since. She enters with very low expectations and kind of ends up exceeding those expectations.
Now, yesterday the First Lady gave an interview in which she said that, I don't know, about this, but how can they possibly know my thinking? How could, and that was one thing she said. Then the next thing she said was, they're just trying to paint me as an angry black woman. Were you surprised at these two assessments about your book by the First Lady?
Well, on the angry black woman thing, I have to think that she must have been responding to the coverage of the book, not the actual book. For one thing, she said she didn't actually read the book, so she doesn't really know what's in it. And then the second thing is that there's no statement in the book of her as an angry black woman. It's the reviews have said this. It's a really textured, nuanced portrait of her as a, well-rounded human being. And by the way, there's a lot in the book of her about her as a supportive spouse, as a mom, as somebody, who's trying to fill the job of First Lady with real worth and meaning. So I was a little bit surprised by the comments, but I think that they go to something weird, which has happened with this book, right? Which is that this is one of these books that everybody's talking about without actually reading.
Right.
And I've gotten a lot of notes.
Welcome to Washington.
I know, welcome to Washington. So I've gotten a lot of notes from people in the last couple of days saying, "Oh my God, Jodi, I I got this last night from a reader in Ohio. I sat down and read your book, and it's nothing like the way it's been described in the media. So I don't know whether that's more gratifying or troubling as an author.
Just very quickly, this technique, though, that is used many times by authors of actually trying to ascribe to the thinking of the individual you're covering, do you use that technique, and how do you justify the use of such a technique?
No, I don't. I use the New York Times rule, right, which is that we do not get inside our subject's head, and if we're going to say that so-and-so thought something or felt something, we need to have a source who is so good that they can convincingly speak to that person's reactions. I'll give you an example. There's a scene in the book of the Obamas having dinner the night that Gabrielle Giffords was shot, and it's very dramatic and very emotional because the Obamas have been worried about security for years, and this is exactly the kind of thing that's their worst-case scenario, right? Some nut with a gun comes up and does something terrible. Except in this case, it's happened not to them, but to Gabrielle Giffords, one of their favorite legislators, and to this 9-year-old girl who's so close in age to Sasha Obama. So how did I get the scene of their having dinner? How did I get their reactions? Well, I sat with Valerie Jarrett upstairs in her West Wing office, and we discussed that evening. Jarrett was having dinner with them this evening. That evening, she described the dinner to me. She described the first couple's reactions. And so that's how I wrote the scene. And if you look at the text, the text doesn't say, Michelle Obama thought to herself, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It says the group of people at dinner talked about, da-da-da-da-da. Their reaction was da-da-da-da-da-da. So I was actually really careful about this stuff.
Well, Jodi, one of the stories that has gotten a lot of coverage is this Alice in Wonderland themed Halloween party. And a lot of the coverage has been, it was a secret party. The press was kept out of it. They wanted to keep it quiet because it might seem too lavish in the 2009, post-crash economy. And then there's been some disputing, well, how secret was it? Was there a press pool there? What is the final verdict on that?
So I think what's gotten confused, and again, this is clear in the text of the book, is that there were two elements of the Halloween celebration. There was the outside part, and that, of course, was completely visible. The Obamas are standing on the north portico greeting trick-or-treaters,
right.
Washington kids. It was the party inside that was much more Hollywoodish. That's where Tim Burton was. That's where Tim Burton and Johnny Depp were. That's where Johnny Depp was in costume. That's the part that was not publicized. And I think what's also gotten lost is the two things that are really significant about that night. First of all, this is kind of a moment of transition in the First Ladyhood because Michelle Obama is actually starting to leave this entertaining stuff behind. Desiree Rogers is beginning to fall out of favor in the White House, and she's moving from kind of Michelle Obama 1.0, who's more about style and entertaining, into more of a Michelle Obama 2.0, much more substantive role, much more focus on childhood obesity. I had many conversations with her advisors about that transition they wanted to make. Then, I have to tell you, I think the most dramatic thing about that night, which is in the book, hasn't really gotten mentioned in the media at all, which is that it was Sasha and Malia Obama's first Halloween in Washington, and they really wanted to just, trick-or-treat like in a normal Washington neighborhood. So they go out to trick-or-treat, just in some random neighborhood. Obviously their parents can't go with them.
Right.
They've got family and friends with them. And, they thought it would be okay because the kids were in costume, and as you know, the ethos in Washington is not really to bother them,
right.
And they hope to keep it very quiet. But they start going from house to house, and you know what happens. People notice that they're there, neighbors are texting each other, people come out, they're starting to take pictures, and the way Eric Whitaker, one of the president's friends, told me the story is he said, look, it began to become some of a zoo. So they basically have to abort mission and go back to the White House. Yeah. So to me, that's a story about the painful realities of this world, about your kids not even being able to trick-or-treat.
All right, Jodi Kantor, thank you so much. Good to have you. It's definitely a book that everybody in this town's talking about right now.
Thank